waiting for has now finally arrived.
From knockouts to tap-outs.
It's all over!
Inside the octagon and beyond.
Is this not real now? Are we pretending?
We're rich, baby. Break out the red panties.
This is the MMA Report with John Pollock.
Unbelievable! Here we go!
Welcome to the MMA Report. I am your host, John Pollock. We have a packed show, as always. We are going to be joined later on in the program by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who is headlining UFC 209. We'll be discussing that card in depth with a preview coming up later, and chatting with Thompson about the first fight and preparations for the rematch as well. But we're going to get right into things, diving into some of the news from the week and a look ahead at 209 as I welcome in my Fight Network colleague, Cody Saftic. Cody, what is going on?
Yes, just gearing up for another big card. And hey, to be featured amongst such a highly regarded guest such as Stephen Thompson, I'm very, very honored, so to speak.
We have the two Wonder Boys of mixed martial arts, Stephen Thompson and Cody Saftic, on the same program.
I know, I think we were joking earlier, it's Wonder Boy and Wonder Bread. And sadly enough, I'm not the Wonder Boy part of that equation.
Yeah, this is a really interesting rematch. I think these top two fights, Cody, while I don't look at this pay-per-view as one that's going to have the same kind of focus and business, quite frankly, of some of the massive blockbuster cards, these are two fights that I cannot wait to see. These are two fights to headline a pay-per-view that are among any other two fights you can throw at me from a recent big card.
Yeah, when you think of the term pay-per-view, you're trying to get the audience to pay their money to watch this event. And when you look at cards like, say, a 208, and there's just so many people saying, well, it's not something I'd pay my money for. Well, what is something you'd pay for? What was something that you would put your hard-earned dollars on? And people like that mega fight. They like that one big attraction. But if you're not going to give them the attraction, it's always been give them two title fights. Give them two good title fights. And in this, I think we have exactly that. The rematch, it speaks for itself. It was a great first fight between Woodley and Thompson. You're getting that rematch, 5 rounds of a brilliant fight, essentially round 6 to 10 now, if it does indeed go that far. And then Khabib versus Ferguson, that on its own sells it to a guy like me. But if you want to go beyond that, then you'll have fights like Lando Venata, where they're clearly trying to get people behind it, buy the pay-per-view. Rashad Evans, a former champion, a big-name guy. I think they've done exactly what they need to do. I don't think it's going to do 1 million buys by no stretch of the imagination, but I do think it'll be a healthy pay-per-view number for them.
Then the number going around for UFC 208 was around 210,000 buys. What are you forecasting for this? Because I don't feel this is going to be significantly higher than 208. I mean, I would peg this around 240, 250. Do you sense above that figure? Do you see that this is going to surprise some people, perhaps?
Yeah, I do think it surprises some people, especially that if your expectation is now super low because of 208, I think it's definitely going to surpass that. If I had to take a guess, I'm guessing around the 400 mark.
400?
Yeah,
wow.
I do think it does a good number. I think that Khabib has a very underrated fan base. A lot of people are behind him. A lot of people do want to see him. My only problem is that Ferguson-Khabib, not pay-per-view draws. If you look at the last time Woodley and Thompson fought, it was on a McGregor fight, so that's the majority of that draw. But I do think if you take 1 million people saw Eddie Alvarez versus Conor McGregor, well, that fight was an exciting fight, the round that you got out of it, but a lot of people left that co-main event thinking, geez, I'd love to see the rematch of that. You're getting the rematch of that. If they can draw some of those 1 million people that probably saw the fight, that'll help out. And then, as I mentioned, I think Khabib and Ferguson will definitely help draw some additional pull into it.
If there's been a mishap, I would say, of the promotion during fight week, I mean, we're speaking on a Thursday afternoon, watching the Embedded series and the Countdown. One big absence is Mark Hunt and Alistair Overeem, which I don't know if that's a calculated move, if there's, maybe they felt with Mark Hunt and the ongoing legal issues that they're having that they chose not to focus on them. But I would say a lot of people are not aware they are fighting on this pay-per-view.
Yeah, that one to me is very shocking because obviously a great fight, obviously a pay-per-view attraction, and the fact is it's not getting much publicity at all. Even the Countdown special, they're not really giving anything. If I had to take a guess, I would attribute to the fact that Mark Hunt has been very outspoken. You're not going to follow this guy around with the camera crew now and give him that platform if he so chooses to say something. And we've just seen by recent comments in the past that maybe he's not in the UFC's good books right now when you're saying stuff like, well, I'm going to sue the UFC. In fact, Dana White, I believe, is currently trying to get this lawsuit dismissed with Mark Hunt. So there's obviously a lot of revolving pieces there. I don't think it's a punishment by them giving him a big fight like this. This is almost
This is a logical fight to make.
A very logical fight. So I think that he stands to benefit a lot from this, but unfortunately he's not getting that same that same media pull. It doesn't seem like any people are, like you said, no one's really talking about it because most people don't even know what's on the card.
Yeah, I think it's a detriment to the promotion because to a lot of outside fans, I mean, that would be the fight that jumps off the page to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you think, okay, well, let's say you're just trying to draw in that casual fan, as you mentioned. Well, we got 2 title fights. Well, what do you got beyond those 2 title fights? Well, former guys like Rashad Evans, but everybody loves that heavyweight matchup. And then when you got a guy like Mark Hunt, who is a name fighter, Alistair Overeem, who is a name fighter, you pair them up together for a rematch of a fight that if you're a hardcore fan, you want to watch it. If you're a casual fan, you still want to watch it. I think they could have done more with it, but it helps complement what I do think will be a fairly successful pay-per-view for them.
All right. Well, we'll have a preview later on in the show on UFC 209. But, of course, the big news of this past week, Cody, the return of Georges St-Pierre, which we all knew was happening, but now it's official that he will be fighting Michael Bisping for the middleweight championship. There's been a lot of negativity that this announcement has been met with. Do you like the idea, first of all, of Georges St-Pierre coming back and doing so at 185 pounds?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I think if you look how the game has progressed, guys have naturally gotten bigger. When I look at when Georges St-Pierre left the UFC, middleweights were middleweights. But now I look at the monstrous guys in the middleweight division, and these guys are just far too big for him. So let's say he is to be victorious over Michael Bisping. Where does he go from there? Does he take on a guy like Yoel Romero, who's actually twice his size? I just don't see the path to victory there. If you think about the last time we saw Georges St-Pierre, 2013 against Johnny Hendricks, Johnny appeared to be a little too big, a little too strong, was able to keep the fight standing, and that's where he did his most damage. You're going to give me a Georges St-Pierre who's now 3 years removed from that, probably more compromised. I can't imagine he's gotten that much better between the age of 32 and 35, and you're going to give me this guy at a higher weight class. To me, that's just a big head scratcher. I get why he would take it. It's a title fight. It's a big fight. It's a money fight. It's logical for him, and he definitely stands a chance of beating Michael Bisping. But where does he go beyond that? I don't know. And when you hear the guy say comments like, I can make 155, I can make 185, well, I think 155 probably would have been the better option here. But once again, I'm not Georges St-Pierre, and he's one of the greatest ever. So who's anybody to deny him a shot if that's what he wants? I
mean, George is around a team that, I mean, they're very meticulous, very conservative. And for years we heard this about the trepidation of going up to fight Anderson Silva because of that size issue. You have to imagine that there is a belief that Michael Bisping is a fight that will be advantageous to us. But you certainly look on paper, Cody, that Michael Bisping, a guy with outstanding conditioning, great takedown defense. This is a fight that there's just so many questions about where Georges St-Pierre is 3.5 years removed from that fight with Johnny Hendricks, which was far from his best performance.
Yeah, big time. So the reason why people love Georges St-Pierre and he became such a big star is that he's such a good athlete. He's someone that he could take you to where you were worse. So if you were bad on the ground, that's where he'd take you. Look at fights back in the day against Jay Huron. There's no way he's taking the thoroughbred down, so he stands with him and he has that good striking. As the game progressed, he would just take guys down. But let's look at the last number of performances that he had. Jake Shields, Josh Koscheck, and Johnny Hendricks. All those guys have good wrestling backgrounds. And as such, he doesn't take any of them down for the most part. He's forced to strike with Koscheck, in which he gets the upper hand. The Shields fight was very lackluster, but he's forced to strike with them largely. And the Johnny Hendricks fight, in a lot of people's opinions, he had lost that fight. So now, as I mentioned, you're giving me him 3 years later. Michael Bisping's takedown defense, very, very good. We've seen him fights against Chael Sonnen, and I get he was, grounded by Tim Kennedy multiple times, but Tim Kennedy is twice the size of Georges St-Pierre. So if this fight is forced to be standing, is Michael Bisping a better striker than Jake Shields and Josh Koscheck and Johnny Hendricks? Absolutely yes. And to the people whose argument is, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of power, the guy knocked out Luke Rockhold. He does have power, and he can sting you with that. Great conditioning, as you mentioned, so 5 rounds should probably play towards him. And that accumulated damage, we've seen this guy get into a dogfight. We really have. When George gets into a dogfight, it's not pretty.
Yeah, it's going to be, to me, it's a much more interesting fight today than it would have been 5 years ago. I think that there's numerous questions about St-Pierre, and I would be very hesitant to just assume we're going to see the Georges St-Pierre of 4 years ago, and he transfers all of that into a new weight class, no less, Cody.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the prime example of BJ Penn's last performance against Yair Rodriguez. As much as you can say, oh, maybe he'll be vintage performance, as much as you can talk to people in his camp that'll tell you he's in great shape, the fact remains is that maybe the game's passed him by a little bit. And I'm not saying George is in that same position. George certainly seems to have more gas in the tank than a guy like BJ Penn.
He's kept great care of himself, and perhaps we'll look back at this, that those 3 years off were vital, where he wasn't going through the rigors of championship training camps throughout all of that. I mean, you can't just assign all of these characteristics to every single fighter. They're all different. They're all going to respond differently to time away. We've seen guys that have left the sport and come back, and there's a renewed energy. Your body is healed significantly. This guy has had numerous knee injuries as well. I mean, there's so many factors. It's going to be a very difficult fight to handicap because there's so many unknowns. Yeah,
I agree. And with that unknown, I think the time could help him off, especially when we're talking about some of his later performances. Also, the guy's known to not take a whole lot of damage. But you look at the Condit fight, the Diaz fight, and the Hendricks fight, more damage taken in those 3 fights than perhaps his entire career. And I know he had a couple wars in the mix there. But certainly the last 3 fights of his career is when you start to see that there's a vulnerability to Georges St-Pierre. So to remove him 3 years, I mean, had he kept fighting back in 2013, I don't know to what length he would have gotten to. But I remember when he left and Johnny Hendricks gets the title. And I'm saying, wow, this is the time for George to come back. He matches up good with Robbie Lawler. He can take him down. He can control him. This is Robbie Lawler from Strikeforce, people. George matches up fantastic. Now you take it a couple years later. Is Robbie Lawler a good matchup for Georges St-Pierre now? I don't know, because what if George can't get that fight to the ground? And a lot of people have a lot of difficulty getting Robbie Lawler down. The dynamic has changed completely. Whereas George should have been a big favorite over a guy like Tyron Woodley or a guy like Stephen Thompson. What's Stephen Thompson's weakness? Well, he can't really wrestle. All George will eat him up. You change the game 3 years, and all of these guys seem to be big favorites over Georges St-Pierre now.
Now, we should explain the negativity, it seems, that has been coming out of this announcement is not so much George going up to middleweight. It's the fact that it is a championship fight where we don't know, should George win this fight, is he even sticking around at 185 pounds? I really don't see a Georges St-Pierre, Yoel Romero scenario. I just don't buy that at all. That George, when he's talking about lightweight, he's talking about middleweight, it just seems that he has his eyes on the biggest fights possible, and Yoel Romero would not be of those options if I'm Georges St-Pierre or I'm advising him. So we could get a gigantic card, which this is going to be. This is the biggest fight the UFC has announced for 2017. But in the wake of this card, could this leave the middleweight division a disaster where it's not short on contenders? And as I bring up Yoel Romero, he's in an awful spot now where he's just waiting around. He can either take a really tough fight to keep busy, or he's going to have to be waiting a significant period of time with no guarantee of a title shot.
Yeah, I mean, to me, honestly, the option would be, and it's not necessarily something I want, but we talk about fighter safety all the time. They should have more weight classes. But if there was a 195-pound weight class, Yoel Romero and Jacare could fight for the 195-pound strap. I think that makes a lot of sense. You still have a spot where a guy like Michael Bisping could be the 85-pound champ, and nobody really thinks he can beat the 195-pound champ. And instead of having 20 pounds between middleweight and light heavyweight, there would be an additional spot. Unfortunately, things are not that easy. That would take years to actually become a reality. And now you just have one more title and one more guy that's trying to avoid this fight and that fight. I don't think the criticism here in this spot is that Georges St-Pierre is coming back. People are happy that Georges St-Pierre is coming back.
Of course.
I don't think that the criticism is necessarily that they don't like this fight, because it's not a bad fight. It's just
I like the fight. And you know what? If this is the fight that both sides wanted, I totally see the reason to make this. There's definitely the negative of what this could do to the division, but I'm not against this fight, given the options. Like, Nick Diaz has shown no desire to come back and fight at this point. So I think that option is out the window. Anderson Silva might have been the best time possible to do that fight.
He just seems almost too big, but I guess if it's both at 185 pounds, and that's the fight that people want to see. Obviously, Nate Diaz would have been an option, McGregor would have been an option, and yeah, those are not all viable options, so you go with Michael Bisping. But let me ask you this. Should people be excited for this fight because it's a good stylistical matchup, or just because it's two named fighters? Because stylistically, this is not a great fight on paper. It's that they're two named guys. And I think most of the criticism for this fight is that people that are rallying for Jacare and Yoel Romero, people like Michael Bisping, whether he's a fan favorite or a villain, people can get behind the guy. He's done a lot, won the Ultimate Fighter, fought 25 times in the UFC over a 10-year span. He deserved getting that title shot at Luke Rockhold. But maybe that's the feel-good moment for him. He got a title shot that, let's be honest here, didn't deserve. Taking it as a short-notice replacement, steps in short notice, and he wins the middleweight title. That in itself is the feel-good moment. But you know what? The guy's earned that one fight. Let's give him the rematch against Dan Henderson. I mean, hell, Henderson's 47 years old. He's not ranked in the top 10 of our middleweight division. But you know what? It's a feel-good story for Michael Bisping, so let's give him that feel-good story. Now you're getting the Georges St-Pierre thing, and it's the same thing. Even Michael Bisping himself is coming out and being like, I deserve a money fight. Why does it have to be the I deserve? You deserved that crack at the title and you got it. And you deserved a layup in your first title defense, which you barely won against Dan Henderson. But now this idea of we owe Michael Bisping something is absurd. He deserves to fight the number one contender in the world, which is Yoel Romero. He's to this point been able to dodge him. And let's say he wins this fight against Georges St-Pierre. Sorry, it sounds like I'm rambling here. But let's say he wins this fight against Georges St-Pierre. Best case for Michael Bisping, win or lose, is retire. I've got a 10-year career, 25 fights in the UFC. I've made money. I won the world title. I knocked out Luke Rockhold. I defeated the greatest ever Anderson Silva. I defeated the greatest ever Georges St-Pierre. What more could Michael Bisping look to attain?
Yeah,
and then you vacate the title, and it's a giant mess.
Listen, there's definitely the ability for a lot of problems to come out of this, but I will say that Yoel Romero has every right to be furious about this. I wouldn't blame him, but I am not going to fault Michael Bisping for looking on paper. A guy that gets a back end of the pay-per-view looking at Yoel Romero, that best case is $300,000, and Georges St-Pierre. It's night and day, and I'm not going to fault a guy for going with the best business fight for his bank account. I think that, I don't think you and I would look at it any differently, Cody, if I could, let's just say I was paid based on downloads to have Conor McGregor on my show where I'm going to do 1 million downloads versus a guy that's an awesome interview, but a quarter of the people are going to tune into. I mean, you
think a quarter would tune into me over McGregor?
I wasn't saying you'd be at least half of Conor. But I mean, to me, it's any guy that's making the business choice. Yes, there's going to be people that are left on the table. That is the downside of having loaded divisions. There are tons of contenders, and at middleweight, Yoel Romero is the most quote-unquote deserving, but in this business that it is, where pay-per-view is a major component and guys are incentivized to fight the person that is going to bring the most eyeballs to a pay-per-view, you are going to go that direction. And for Michael Bisping, if there's a silver lining to this, if Michael Bisping were to beat Georges St-Pierre with 1 million homes buying this on pay-per-view, he's that much bigger of a star fighting Yoel Romero afterwards than if they were to fight in 2 months from now.
Fair, but now your issue is, wow, I just went from a career-high payday to the 300,000 buys. Nobody wants to take a step back, and maybe that's in the issue. You can never fault Michael Bisping because, listen, the guy's got a family. He's got a 10-year-plus career. He's got a detached retina. He's getting older. You got to take the biggest money fight, absolutely. And if you're the UFC, it should be up to the UFC to say you have to fight the number of good. But hey, listen, they're a business too. They have to make the biggest fights imaginable. So no matter how much the fans don't like it and how much Yoel Romero or Jacare don't like it, it makes sense for the company. It makes sense for the champion. They're going to do it every single time. And unfortunately, that's the situation they're in. But it's like I talked with Michael Bisping. Let's say he's getting $2 a pay-per-view buy, everything beyond 500,000 buys. It does 1 million buys, an extra $2 million in his pocket, $1 million for being the champion. Coming off a $3-4 million payday, I can't see him being like, I'll fight Yoel Romero for a fraction of the price.
It's a fair assessment of the landscape at middleweight. Could you see any scenario in which Yoel Romero starts eyeing 205 pounds where I feel you could justify giving Yoel a title fight right off the bat against the winner of Cormier and Anthony Johnson if you're not ready to have John Jones immediately fight for the title?
Yeah, with Gegard Mousasi tied up with the Chris Weidman fight, Mousasi's really my guy, then yeah, why not Yoel Romero? We've talked about this in the past. 205 is such a thin division that there's a lot of opportunity for some of these guys to jump up.
A lot of middleweights. I've always
there.
said that. With all those contenders at middleweight that are just on hold, 205 pounds is very appealing to me. If I feel I can, even if I'm giving up somewhat in size at 205, that division, it's theirs for the taking to go up there. Like, they are desperate for contenders.
Well, that's exactly it. And if you're Yoel Romero, you look at that rankings board and you see Volkan Ozdemir in the top 10, you have to sneeze and you're a top-ranked light heavyweight. He's a big guy. His wrestling accolade probably carries him over there. I don't know if the fact that yeah, who knows? I mean, it seems like he'd be undersized, but the wrestling would certainly help him out. And he's got decent cardio because he paces himself out unbelievably
Think about the fact that if Yoel was announced tomorrow that he's getting the winner of Cormier and Johnson,
fun fight.
Outside of John Jones, there isn't a light heavyweight in that division that could possibly vocalize anger about this guy getting a title fight. There's no one that can claim that they're getting that anyone's jumping the line here. Yoel Romero could get the title fight immediately. If if someone were to get hurt, they could put Yoel Romero in that fight in Buffalo.
Yeah, and if I'm him, I'm getting older, and the UFC saying, well, just wait until we see the result of Bisping St-Pierre. And, you're just going to have to wait. You know what? Jacques Carré probably equally as tough as most of the fights at 205. Don't really want to fight him again. Why not make
Romero and Cormier? Sign me up. Two Olympic wrestlers.
Yeah.
Romero and Johnson is a really fascinating fight.
If Johnson doesn't like being on the ground, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of interesting fights that I would at least be looking at that because, I mean, George wins this title. Who knows where this division is going? Let's finish off discussing the light heavyweights because we got some finality to the Misha Cirkunov saga as after it looked like he was done and Dana White and him were on different pages, they have since reconciled and now Misha Cirkunov back in the fold and I would imagine back in the light heavyweight rankings.
Yeah, I would have to imagine that they themselves, let him walk. Sir, this is what the rankings look like without him. Oh, jeez. Well, okay, let's talk to him one more time, see if we can't hash this thing out. I think they need a guy like Misha Cirkunov. He's obviously ultra talented. He possesses an X factor in the division in that, at least when you look at Cormier, he has that Olympic level wrestling. That's what makes him a threat. When you look at Johnson, it's that unbelievable murderous power punching. When you look at Misha, this guy is phenomenal on the ground. He already has Johnson's endorsement as this is a top contender in the division, and that creates some interest. They need guys at 205. He seems someone who maybe can't challenge right now, but given a couple fights, then he can challenge. And when I look at the division, I see guys like Shogun, who, by the way, would benefit huge from that 195-pound division. Those guys are getting older, but they still have that name. And for Misha to go and maybe beat a guy like Shogun or Little Nogueira, I think that would help him out a lot, helps out the division, and just bring in these pieces.
Yeah, I think that was a massive gain by the UFC by being able to lock up Cirkunov because I think, as we've just outlined, a lot of issues with depth at light heavyweight. We'll end off there. Quickly, some fight announcements from this week. Damian Maia, Jorge Masvidal will fight at UFC 211 on May the 13th. Alexander Gustafsson and Glover Teixeira May 28th in Stockholm, Sweden. And Claudia Gadelha against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Of those three fights, Cody, which one has your most interest?
I don't know if I'm marking out here, but Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Claudia Gadelha. I really like that fight considering I think this is the two best girls outside of Joanna and Jacek. And when you get a fight where the champion is so dominant, you're getting the 2 and 3, as in a Khabib versus Ferguson, I get really excited. So I think this is a good stylistical matchup for both of them. And despite not being 205-pound males like a Glover Teixeira versus a Gustafsson, I think this is a good fight.
Yeah, I think Maia and Masvidal, that's going to be a lot of fun as well, happening in Dallas, Texas. All right, we'll take the time out, and then we're coming back with Stephen Thompson chatting about his rematch with Tyron Woodley for the welterweight title this Saturday night.
Okay, well, here's the issue with what Bruce Buffer just said. Okay, no. Listen, let me just explain to everybody what happened. Okay, go ahead. No. It's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a correction. This contest has been judged a majority draw.
Okay, what that means is the exact same score, Tyron, it's the exact same score that they just repeated. You won on one scorecard, a draw on two scorecards. It's a majority draw. It's the exact same score. He just read the result incorrectly. You still retain your title, obviously.
Welcome back, everybody, to the program. John Pollock with you. We have been chatting all show long about UFC 209. It's coming up Saturday night from the T-Mobile Arena. It will be headlined by a rematch for the welterweight gold as Tyron Woodley defends against this man who joins us, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Feeling good, my friend. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I have to imagine that at this point in time, given you did a whole training camp for Tyron, then there was the fallout of UFC 205, another camp for Tyron Woodley. Are you ready to move on from the Tyron Woodley chapter of your career at this point once Sunday occurs, and hopefully with a welterweight championship around your waist?
You know what? I'm in this game to fight the best guys in the world, and Tyron is definitely it. I mean, he's a champion for a reason, and I'm just excited to go out there and do it again with this guy. I mean, we had a great fight last time, fight of the night, and you know what? It wouldn't bother, preparing for another opponent, but he's the guy that I'm going to be facing off against with Saturday, and that's the only guy I'm thinking about.
I think that, once we're removed from these two fights, I think we're going to look back and learn a lot about the legacies of both Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson with these two fights. Have you had a chance to at least reflect over these last couple of months and things that you've learned about your career, going 25 minutes? And that's always what a fighter aspires to when they go into a championship fight, how they react to certain elements, and this entire build-up for this rematch as well. Are there parts where you look that you are a different fighter from the one that signed the contract the first time to fight Tyron?
Oh, definitely. That was one of the things that I saw at watching my last fight was I was very hesitant out there. I was walking around very small. I was walking about 182, so when I was in the octagon, I got up to 178. And you can't do that against a big welterweight, such as Tyron. He walks around over 200 pounds. So definitely more explosive, walk around at a heavier weight. I'm faster, I feel. My mind's right. I feel more confident going into this fight, knowing that I can take his big shots and his right hand. And I know he's going to be a little more aggressive going into this fight, looking for the takedown. So we're ready for it wherever the fight goes.
How much do you expect to be when you walk into the cage on Saturday, if you're willing to divulge?
Hopefully I'm back up to 190.
Wow.
To be honest with you, I've been walking around about that, for several weeks now. So that's the plan.
Is that the heaviest you'll ever have been for a fight? Is this something that's a change from past weights that you've walked into the cage at?
I used to walk around a little heavier at 195. And I don't know, I started walking around a whole lot lighter when I fought Jake Ellenberger and then Johnny Hendricks, so walking around about 185, and just kept going down from there. I got down to 182 and just wanted to make the weight cut a little easier. But when you are fighting someone as big as Tyron, you have to walk around a little bit heavier, so that way you're stronger in those clinch positions. So that's when I made the choice to walk around the heavier right after that fight.
A rematch like this, where you're coming off a majority draw, it seems that you could have two different approaches to this rematch. You could look at it from one side saying just a few slight differences and I'm the welterweight champion of the world, or you just look at it that I want to present a completely different game plan to throw off Tyron Woodley. I don't expect you to give us away your game plan, but how do you approach a rematch like this where the first fight was so close? Do you just look at it as a brand new fight, or are we looking at round 6 on Saturday night?
Well, you know what? You might be looking at a different fight because, Tyron's an intelligent guy. He's going to go back and make some changes, and so am I. So we're going to be throwing some different things out there for one another, and that's what makes the game so exciting. You got to be able to go out there and figure those out. Like I said, I think he's going to be more aggressive going into this next fight, looking for the takedown. But you know what? I got a lot of tricks up my sleeves as well, and you might even see a takedown from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson out there Saturday night.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe the Chris Weidman fingerprints could be on this fight.
There you go.
When you go back and rewatch that 4th round, I think a lot of people focus on that guillotine by Tyron Woodley. Do you feel that it was somewhat of a moral victory there? The fact that you survived that in this fight, that Tyron Woodley, where, it's instinctual, you're just going for what is available to you, that may not be something in Tyron Woodley's arsenal in this particular fight, knowing that, he expended a lot of energy and he could not submit you. Did you take that as a moral victory, the fact that you were able to survive that in the 4th round?
It does gives me more confidence going into this next fight, knowing that I've taken his best shot, and survived it. Not saying that punch couldn't knock me completely out, because, you saw how powerful he is and what he did to Robbie Lawler. But knowing that, that's something he's got to think about. That's right. That's something he's got to think about and know that whoever steps out there with me is in for a rough night.
When it came to the end of the fight, I don't know if you watched the Oscars on Sunday night. I'm sure I'm not the first one to bring this up, but I immediately thought of UFC 205 during this debacle about announcing who won Best Picture. What's going through your mind on that night at UFC 205 as they're coming in and they're going to re-announce the scores for the fight and the winner? What's going on in your head? Because Tyron was thinking that they were going to be taking the title from him. What's going through your mind in the cage that night?
Everything happened so fast. When they announced him being the winner, and I'm sitting here thinking, wait a second, I know I did better than that. And as soon as I turn around, I look at Dana White, and he's right there, and he's like, listen, stay up here. It was a draw. Stay right here. Stay here. Don't move. So everything happened so fast, and it really didn't hit me till after everything was going on. I was like, wait a second, I felt that I won the second, the third, and the fifth round. He definitely won the first and the fourth. But you know what? It is what it is. We tied it up. We're going to be running it back, and you're going to see a different fight come Saturday, and we're both itching a bit to get out there and do it again.
Was there ever a point in the ensuing weeks where you had thought, man, I'm not going to get this rematch? Did you ever hit that point, or were you always confident that it was the most logical fight to make at welterweight, even though there were all these names being thrown out by Tyron Woodley? What was your darkest point when you thought maybe this isn't going to happen for me?
After the fight, I figured, I've got this fight. When people run it back, you always run it back, and that was the mindset that I had going out there. But eventually, you hear Tyron talking about other guys, Damian Maia, Conor McGregor, even going up a weight class fighting Michael Bisping. And I was like, wait a second, how can you be happy with the draw? How can you move on for something like that? So I poked at him a little bit on social media, and I think it got to him. He ended up signing that contract, but it wasn't like I was sitting there sweating, but I was like, wait a second, he's talking about these other guys, and he should be talking about fighting me. And so I wasn't too worried about it. I figured it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time.
A question I've always had for you, in regards to your father, if the UFC had been at the level it is now, back when he was competing, do you think that has he expressed to you if he would have gone this direction in mixed martial arts?
I think so. I've done pretty much everything that I could in kickboxing, and if the MMA was here back when my dad was fighting, he would definitely be fighting in mixed martial arts, I believe. And he's been with me since day one, and been my coach since day one, and he's a lifelong martial artist and always studying, and he would definitely be fighting in the UFC too, I believe.
Yeah, it's always an interesting hypothetical when you look at that. Before we let you go, obviously a big story, especially up here in Canada. It's the return of Georges St-Pierre. It's been announced he will fight Michael Bisping for the middleweight championship. Your thoughts on George, a guy you've worked with, going up to 185 pounds, and what was your reaction with this being the fight announced for his return?
I thought it was pretty cool. Me and George go way back. He's a good buddy of mine. Trained with him before I even started mixed martial arts. He was my inspiration to switch from kickboxing to MMA. And to hear that he's coming back is I think it's cool, man. And he's one of the best welterweights who ever stepped in the octagon. And moving up to 185, the guy, he's a big 172. So I think he's going to do great out there. And I can't wait to see what he's going to bring to the table, him being out for so long. But like I say, he's a lifelong martial artist, always studying, always training, and so I don't think it will be that big of a difference. I think he's made some changes in his game because he's always evolving. So, man, I'm interested and excited to see what he brings to the table as well.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you very much. I know you've probably done so many interviews this week. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. UFC 209 is coming up Saturday night, 10 Eastern on pay-per-view. Excellent rematch for the welterweight title, Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson. Go back and watch the first fight because it was tremendous as well. And all the best on Saturday, Stephen. Great to catch up with you.
Thank you very much, my friend. Have a good one.
Thank you to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for joining us. Of course, he is headlining UFC 209, which we will quickly go over before we wrap up the show. And of course, this weekend we were chatting with Cody earlier about Bellator 174, which is up on Friday night. Interesting Bellator card with Julia Budd taking on Marlus Kunin, and our guest from last week, Brandon Gertz, taking on Fernando Gonzalez. And it's kind of interesting how when you look at the different featherweight divisions for the women, there is depth to that division. Unfortunately, that depth is spread out over UFC, Bellator, and Invicta. And if you were to amalgamate them all, you'd have what would be a very interesting division that you could at least launch. But in the case of Bellator, you're looking at Kunin and Budd with, Alexis Dufresne would presumably be in the mix. She's fighting on the undercard on Friday, that they could maybe redo Kunin and Dufresne, although you did have the weight-cutting issues with Dufresne from that particular fight. So that's what's coming up on Friday night, the eve of UFC 209. And going into Saturday, the undercard here, light heavyweight fight will be on Fight Pass as the unbeaten Tyson Pedro and Paul Craig. Someone's O has got to go as the light heavyweight division very much trying to find itself in the UFC, that there is an opening for someone to have a great performance. And you've seen of late with someone like a Misha Serkinov that you put a few wins together and all of a sudden you are thrust into that upper echelon of the division. It's an easier path, I should say, to the top of a division at light heavyweight than other weight classes at the moment. And then the televised prelims, I mean, you look at this, I would not say the most star-studded televised prelims. Darren Elkins against Mirsad Bektic. Bektic is an unbelievable prospect at featherweight. I think he is someone to really keep your eye on. He's got a good test here in Darren Elkins, who's looked good since going to Team Alpha Male, but I'm certainly favoring Bektic in that fight. Luke Sanders taking on Yuri Alcantara. Marcin Tybura taking on Luis Henrique, and Mark Godbeer against Daniel Spitz. And then into the main card, Alistair Overeem and Mark Hunt is happening on this particular card. There has been so little attention on this fight, and I don't know if that is a byproduct of Mark Hunt's ongoing legal issues with the UFC that he has been pursuing, but not featured on Embedded, not featured on the Countdown show, at least up until this recording. I mean, we had a brief cameo of Mark Hunt on the Embedded, but no kind of interviews or any big focus on this match. And this is a notable heavyweight fight. Alistair Overeem's first fight since he took on Stipe Miocic back in September. Mark Hunt will be turning 43 years old later this month and giving up a sizable reach to Alistair Overeem, about 8 inches in total. I like Alistair Overeem in this fight. I just feel that with Mark Hunt, there's a lot of questions about him. And, I mean, we saw him not look spectacular against Brock Lesnar, was just repeatedly taken down and controlled. Now, granted, that fight ended up being a no contest with the drug test results that Brock Lesnar failed. So you somewhat have to throw that fight out, but it's not as though the performance was there for Mark Hunt either. And going back prior to that, he had wins over Antonio Silva and Frank Mir coming into that fight. This guy always has that ability to end anyone's night quickly with a knockout. But with Alistair Overeem, I just feel that you have to favor Alistair Overeem. He was looking really good, even up until he was finished by Stipe Miocic, looking very good prior to that fight as well with his 4-fight win streak, and was landing on Stipe Miocic before he was stopped. So I will be taking Alistair Overeem. David Tamor will be taking on Lando Venata at 155 pounds. This one ends up on the main card. Venata has had 2 very exciting fights in his UFC tenure. The first being that short notice fight he took against Tony Ferguson, where we have never seen Tony Ferguson as vulnerable as he was in that first round against Venata. And then, unfortunately, Venata just had very little left in the second round, and Ferguson was able to submit him. David Tamor, he came off the Ultimate Fighter Season 22 and fought one of the rare cases of an Ultimate Fighter participant who fought at his natural weight class on the show and remaining at lightweight. Coming off of the show, he has scored a pair of second-round stoppages in his actual UFC fights, non-exhibition bouts, with Martin Svensson and Jason Novelli back in August. This should be a really fun fight. I feel that Lando Venata, with a full training camp, we saw what he did against John McDessie, a knockout of the year contender for many back in December at UFC 206. I like Venata in this fight. Should be a fun one. Largely a striking affair you would envision between these two. Rashad Evans and Dan Kelly. A lot of questions about Rashad Evans coming back from, lots of injuries that have really curtailed his career since 2013. Since that time, he had the long layoff before coming back and then lost to Ryan Bader in a fight that many assumed he would defeat Bader in, and that was not the case, and then losing to Glover Teixeira in stunning fashion a year ago back in April. So with Evans, it's been his latest setback, now debuting at 185 pounds. He had a lot of setbacks. He was supposed to fight Tim Kennedy back at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The commission saw an irregularity and flagged him, took him off the show the week of. Then the Ontario Commission in Canada wasn't going to let him fight in Toronto at 206, so he's had lots of setbacks. He's been approved to fight here in Nevada, and he takes on Dan Kelly, who has had quite the ability to just grind his way to victories. He's won his last 3, although you look at the competition he has fought, Steve Montgomery, Antonio Carlos Jr., Chris Camozzi, with due respect, not former champions like he is getting on Saturday night. Last loss was all the way back in May of 2015. That was a 49-second stoppage to Sam Alvey. I mean, I would not be stunned if Dan Kelly is able to frustrate Evans and just use a lot of his kind of unorthodox striking to get to Evans, but man, that would really signal a fall from grace for Rashad Evans if he is not able to beat a Dan Kelly level of fighter, and would showcase the fact that a new weight class may not agree with Evans. I am going to pick Rashad Evans in this fight. I feel that he is going to get back to basics. I don't necessarily look at the Glover Teixeira fight as a signal that this guy is done. I mean, Glover Teixeira, he's a quality light heavyweight. And Rashad Evans at the new weight class, we may see a much quicker Rashad Evans. We'll see how much he focuses on wrestling, taking on a guy that went to the Olympics in judo. Not an easy takedown is Dan Kelly. But I will still go with Rashad Evans. And if he loses this fight, there will be a lot of questions about him at the age of 37. Into the top 2 fights we go. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. This is just an outstanding fight at 155 pounds. Some believe the 2 best guys at 155 pounds. Conor McGregor, he's this shadow over top of the lightweight division, but I can't even guarantee that the next fight is going to be to unify those titles. This could be a case where we have the regular champion in Conor McGregor and an interim champion, and they could go in their separate ways for an extended period of time. I don't necessarily believe that Conor McGregor's next fight will be against the winner of this particular fight. So we could have a lengthy stay of this interim lightweight gold. This is just such an interesting fight from so many different perspectives. I mean, with Tony Ferguson, we've seen this guy get hit, whether it was to a degree with Josh Thompson, certainly in that first round with Edson Barbosa, and that first round against Lando Venata. This guy can get tagged, but he shows a remarkable resiliency to come back. And especially with Barbosa and Venata, those were the cases where not a great first round, but then stopping them in the second. In the case of Nurmagomedov, this guy has looked damn near flawless in the UFC and throughout his career. 24-0. He had the long layoff of 2 years coming back last July where he beat Daryl Horcher, and we got a better indication of where he was at against more leveled competition with Michael Johnson back in November, where Johnson had some brief success standing, but once Nurmagomedov was able to get him down to the ground, which I feel he will get to do with Ferguson, it was all Nurmagomedov, and he dominated the rest of that fight until he finished Johnson, who is no easy out at 155 pounds. The key here is how Ferguson adapts if and when he is taken down. I think it's an inevitability that Nurmagomedov can take him down, but Ferguson is as comfortable as any lightweight off of his back. Very well versed in his submission game through Eddie Bravo. We know that Darce is going to be something that he is fishing for throughout this fight. Nurmagomedov, it's going to be his top control and his ability to continually deflate Tony Ferguson and take him down. And where his striking figures into this. Not enough people give Nurmagomedov respect for his striking, but that's an element of his game. He is very vocal about the fact that he has underrated, or I should say underappreciated, striking. I just think given the fact this is a 5-round fight, I like Nurmagomedov in this fight. Tony Ferguson, he's been able to find himself in holes that he can work himself out of. I don't know if Nurmagomedov is the style of fighter you want to get into any kind of a hole in, because that guy will not just take you down, he will be vicious on top. He is... In another element is the new scoring criteria where Nurmagomedov, his style very much caters to 10-8 rounds where he can dominate on top and deliver lots of damage while on top. So whether he can finish Tony Ferguson or not is a question, but I like Khabib Nurmagomedov in this particular fight and becomes the interim lightweight champion. This should be an awesome fight, though. And then we go to the main event rematch between Tyron Woodley and our guest from earlier, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, for the welterweight title. The first fight was a great fight back at Madison Square Garden in New York City. I felt it was a draw the first time around. I thought that Woodley won the first round, and he definitely won the fourth. And the fourth, I did have a 10-8. 2, 3, and 5, I felt were Thompson rounds, but you can certainly argue 2 and 3. 2 and 3 were very close rounds. There's a range of scores you can have for that fight. I will say this, though. The scoring criteria and the adjustments made, if that fight in November were to happen today, I think everyone is giving that first round a 10-8 for Woodley, and that would have given him the fight. So that's something to keep in mind here. Stephen Thompson, interesting what he said in the interview we just heard, that he's going to be going into this fight heavier because of Woodley's size, and that's always something that can be concerning. If you recall, Georges St-Pierre tried something like that when he fought Jake Shields back at UFC 129 in 2011, going in a few pounds heavier and putting on some muscle, and it was notable he was a bit slower. Now, he also had the eye injury in that fight that he had to overcome, and that was the prevailing issue in that fight for George, which he still won. But I'm always somewhat concerned when guys are packing on muscle, and Stephen Thompson very much relies on speed and movement, and you wonder if that will have any kind of an impact. As he also said in the interview, this isn't the first time he's come in heavier than that 178 range, as he will be coming in above on Saturday, as he told us. So that will be something to watch. Tyron Woodley, it will be important for him to work those takedowns, and he seemed to have that game plan drilled in the first fight, where when those kicks come, he's grabbing it and initiating the takedown. And he did that in the first round, and that was a dominant first round for him. And of course, Tyron Woodley has the power to stop anyone at 170 pounds. It's such a close fight to call because the first one was. I'm going with Tyron Woodley in this fight. Certainly will not surprise me either way. This is one of those fights that you can really look at, flip a coin and see who has the better game plan, who can take the most positive out of the first fight and make the necessary adjustments without blowing out the game plan and ignoring what did work in the first fight, extrapolating it to the second, and being able to find a formula that works. I don't know if either guy is going to come in and draw upon a lot of the first fight if they're looking at this as a brand new fight, a different game plan from each individual. I'm very, very much interested in this fight for a lot of different reasons. My pick will be Tyron Woodley, but these are two fights at the top of this card that are outstanding. So that is our preview of UFC 209, and it's going to wrap up the show. I want to thank you all for tuning in. As you can probably tell, I am very much under the weather this week, so thank you for lasting throughout this show with me, as I'm barely lasting. I want to thank Cody Saftic from the Fight Network for joining me. Him and I will be back. We're doing a live preview show on the Fight Network at noon Eastern on Saturday, and that will replay throughout the day. Leading into UFC 209, we're going to be hearing from John Ramdian and Robin Black, who are in Las Vegas covering the card, interviewing many of the fighters on the main card. So tune in Saturday at noon Eastern on Fight Network. Also want to thank Stephen Thompson, who of course will be headlining UFC 209 against Tyron Woodley. We will be back next week with a brand new show. Don't forget to subscribe to the MMA Report with John Pollock on iTunes. You can follow me at I am John Pollock on Twitter, and we will chat with you next week.